Welcome, everybody. I'm Isabel. I'm the Children and Family Development Worker for the Church of Scotland. And this is the last of our fourth series of ReNew webinars, and these will all be found on the Church of Scotland YouTube channel. And the topic tonight is joined up thinking and joined up faith. How do we make those connections between households, schools, and our churches? And we're delighted that Lucy Moore from the Growing Faith Foundation in the Church of England is going to help us and guide us in our thinking for that. But just before we start, I wanted just to share a short video clip to help us to think about the children that are in our lives, in our communities, and in our churches.
You'll find us laughing,
playing,
singing and talking.
You'll find us hurting,
lying, fighting
and crying.
You'll find us in homes,
in schools,
and in clubs.
You'll find us in parks,
on the street,
and in churches.
We are your children, your youth,
and your responsibility.
The pressure of the culture continues to weaken the influence of our families and the church over us.
It is becoming harder and harder to hear the message of God's love.
Now is the time for shining the spotlight on the children and youth in our world for 10 long years.
We don't need another program.
We don't need more events or church camps. We need a church that will care for us and build us in a wide variety of ways into the family of God's people, full of life and fun.
We want and need opportunities to minister to others in ways appropriate to our age and experience,
our abilities and gifts.
We are disciples in training, not disciples in waiting.
Please don't underestimate us.
We are the church of today
and the church of the future.
But you're in danger of losing us.
You are losing us.
You're 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 losing us. You're losing us. You're losing us.
Will you do whatever it takes to reach us?
Please set aside your differences and meet us where we are.
Will you teach us how to live?
We are within your grasp.
Please take time to share Christ with us.
Because in 10 years, I'll be 27.
In 10 years, I'll be 16.
I'll be 21.
I'll be 25.
In 10 years, I'll be 21.
I'll be 19.
I'll be 26.
I'll be 20.
In 10 years, I'll be 19.
In 10 years, I'll be 24.
In 10 years' time, I'll be 22.
I'll be 27.
I'll be 21.
I'll be 22.
The question is.
Question is.
The question is.
Question is.
Question is.
The question is.
The question is. The question is.
The question is.
The question is.
The question is.
The question is, in 10 years, will you have made a difference?
I thought that was an appropriate way to start our meeting this evening. Let us pray. Lord God, we thank you for the love you have for children and families. Be with us now as we explore ways forward to reach and connect, to share the message of God's love with this generation and the next and the next. We pray that we may play our part over this next 10 years to be effective stewards of your love and of your care and of your concern for all those in our communities. So we invite you to speak to us through this evening in Jesus' name. Amen. So, Lucy, I'd love to invite you to share with us and encourage and inspire us.
Thank you, Isabel. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to be with you and see some very familiar faces. It's great. I'm Lucy. I'm head of the Growing Faith Foundation, as Isabel said. I came to it a couple of years ago after being with Messy Church for 20 years. Yeah, was it that long? Gosh, where does the time go? Yeah, it's really lovely to be part of a team which is exploring sort of complementary ways of helping children and young people to come close to God and to grow in faith and discipleship. And in lots of ways, it feels I've gone from, kind of wonderful, messy, gluey, sticky, messy church across different countries and different denominations into just the Church of England, alone. And so sometimes it feels like a very strange sort of move. And other times God reminds me that actually there's a whole lot of work to do still. And it's really interesting, that powerful video, Isabel, it was probably made, gosh, would it be about 10 years old
It
now?
would be made. I shared it at a recent conference, and there's a church in Northern Ireland that made a very similar one. And somebody at the conference said, I know two of those children. They're now parents. Two of them are leaders in the church. Don't know what's happened to the rest of them, but so and I think sometimes we just think about the now and the this year in our program and children as they are now. But actually, when you think about that 10-year period, and that 10, if you like, that 10-year generation, it's quite challenging, really, to think about what we need to be doing.
It's really powerful, and just really weird, isn't it, to think that those children speaking whenever it was 10 years or so ago, they had no idea that a global pandemic was waiting. And the utter shift in the landscape that's brought about for us in churches with children's work, especially. How does that look?
Yep.
I now can't see any of you at all.
Okay.
Picking your noses for all I know, or looking really, really bored, or shaking your fist in anger, and I wouldn't know. That is dreadful. Honestly, Zoom, you've let me down. So please, just chip in as much as you can verbally. Just say anything, because I literally can't see you at all. So please interrupt at any time. With this size group, we can easily do that. Yeah, just come in with your stories and your comments as we go along. So joined up thinking, growing faith through church homeschool connections. And this is a kind of vague outline for tonight. If I talk us through growing faith and the home church school connections, and it'll have chatty bits in it, then we may need a screen break. We may not, depends how tough you're feeling tonight, but it's probably been a hard, long day for some of you. And then we were going to breakouts, but we can stay on the screen and chat through some of the questions arising, and finish as and when we'd like to. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
Marvelous. Is that all right, Stuart? I could just hear you speaking a little bit. Great. It's really hard to know sometimes what brings change about, isn't it? It's really hard to know what motivates people and inspires them to get changing things, to be on board with the change that God's bringing, to jump on God's boat, as it were. And sometimes I've started talks with the doom and gloom and the depression of the statistics in the Church of England about church attendance, and the number of children and young people before and after the pandemic, and the downward trajectories and so on. And actually, less and less, I think, is that terribly effective or the whole picture, more importantly, is not the whole picture. And I have, since I started this work, I've had a real sense that we are standing in a kairos moment, a moment where God says, here are lots and lots of opportunities for you. Here's a moment, a special moment, a precious moment, a unique moment in your life, in your history, in the history of the church. And here's the door standing ajar. I invite you to go through. I'm not forcing you. Use it or lose it. And it really feels to me as if that's where we are at the moment, that there's something happening around children and young people in the church that we're just waking up to. And we've got opportunities that we haven't had before to really make a difference, to really change the culture about how the church is with children and young people. And one of the things that we've got in the Church of England, and I don't know the Church of Scotland strategy, so I'm only talking from the Church of England point of view tonight, but do chip in with how the Church of Scotland has a similar vision or a very different vision, and what your experience of that is. But the Church of England's, as you see on the screen, the first bold outcome of the vision and the strategy is to double the number of children and young active disciples in the Church of England by 2030. And so this doubling the number of children and young people is one of the three main thrusts of what we're trying to do up to 2030. And so suddenly people have gone, well, that's not going to happen on its own, especially post-pandemic. What do we need in order to make that happen? So there are all sorts of wonderful strategies and movements and ideas and resources being pumped into trying to help the church become younger and more diverse. Younger and more diverse is the the sort of aim of all the aims, if you like, the outcome that we're really aiming at. The others are becoming a church where mixed ecology is norm, and a church of missionary disciples. And you can see that the three things, younger and more diverse, mixed ecology is the norm, and missionary disciples, they all tie in together. But this one about becoming younger and more diverse is seen as we've got to crack this. We've really, if we don't do anything else, we have to make this happen. And the Growing Faith Foundation was set up to be part of that vision. It was lovely to see or to hear the voices of the children and young people straight off. And one of the things that we've become increasingly conscious of is that it's very easy to talk about young people and to talk at young people and to decide things for young people and not actually give them a voice in what we do. So as adults, as crusty grey-haired adults, come up with all these great ideas, but are they actually what rings the bell for children? So the lassie in the middle of the screen here with the microphone is Toby. We've actually found it so difficult to prioritise the voice of children and young people and really make sure that it gets into everything that we do, that we've had to make a full-time appointment for somebody who's just there to do that. And Toby started with us in, when was it? February? Yeah, right at the end of January, I think. And so she's only been with us 5 minutes. And her role is to make sure that we have the voice of children and young people shaping what we do continually as the foundation and bringing that voice into everything we do. So we're going to kick off with a little clip from a conversation, as you can see, that Toby had at Church House with a bunch of teenagers. I think they were year 8, 9, something like that. And it's just a tiny clip of that conversation. But do you see the girl on the right-hand side with the lanyard, or they've all got lanyards, sort of second along from the front of the screen, as it were? Listen to what she says. It's something actually really moving and quite profound. And Isabel, can you tell me if you can't hear the noise from the screen as we kick off?
Part of the Growing Faith Foundation is to put children and young people at the centre of all that we do at the Church of England.
I think one thing you should know is sometimes we don't know, and so when you ask us questions, sometimes we might not know the answer, but we know that we want something different than what's happening, so we do need a lot of your help. Rather than just us kind of making a lot of the decisions, we do need help and guidance on that journey.
It's important that religion stands as like a safe point, and religious communities stand as a place for people who are stressed or going through something bad to go to escape from all of the bad stuff that's going on. I feel like that would be a great focus.
You are the future, okay? And we want to make sure that we are listening to your voices.
Maybe add more like interactive activities so that the students can like also take part in it, so it isn't just like a speaker there telling you about what it is.
You don't want religion just to be one more thing that's going on in your life. You want it to be embedded in your life, in the values you hold.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I feel so honoured to have heard everything that you guys have to say about, you know, what I really take away from this conversation we had right now is having space to just be, and not a massive expectation for you guys to know everything, and just to be. And there are so many nuggets that I can go back and listen to, so I want to thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Just before we move on, did anything grab you, strike you from what the youngsters were saying there, or from the way that Toby encouraged them to say it?
I think it was quite interesting that they acknowledged that actually they don't have the answers, because we will ask young people, what do you want? And then when they don't tell us what they want, we think it's because they don't know. It's because nobody's actually pointed them in the right direction. And they did acknowledge that they need help and guidance, but they still want to be able to help to decide things rather than having them decided for them.
That's a really good point, Anne. We've done some research this year with various people, various projects, and one of them was into listening to the voice of children. It was primary school age rather than young youth, as it were. And one of the things that the researcher discovered, rather to her horror, was that the children couldn't give very good answers. But the reason was because they couldn't understand that the church wanted to listen to them. They just couldn't compute that the church was interested in their voice, because it's never been interested in their voice before. So why are you, what are you asking for? What are you going to do with it? I don't know why you want my opinion. So really good point, Stuart.
I think that's similar to the grown-ups also in our congregations, when the adults, when we ask them a question, often they don't know how to frame it in their own words, because all they've ever heard is other people's words. So giving them the opportunity to talk, and that's the adults and the children, it's very important. And because many children have only, their experience of churches is only what they don't want to be involved in, the way we've always done it in the past, and so they don't know what else is possible. So we need to experiment and show them lots of different ways that church could be, so that they can choose. And that's the same kind of challenge we have with taking church into the unchurched community around us. Is they've only ever seen what they see on the TV, and they don't know what it could be like, different from the way it is.
Yeah, and it needs a lot of humility, I think, on the part of the church to say, we might not have all the answers, we might not have this right, and perhaps people are not coming for very good reasons. Perhaps we're not as welcoming as we thought we were. Perhaps we're not actually listening to people so that they can shape what we're doing. Maybe we're not ready for that, and it is a big question for churches, but really important when you're wanting to be missional and look out and be a church for people who aren't there yet. Yeah,
be interesting and relevant to the people that don't come.
Exactly. Yeah, but listening to them to find out how do they want to worship God? Because I mean, the youngsters on this screen, they're what, 13, 14 years old. I mean, they're a lifetime apart from me in terms of experience, in terms of their relationship with the digital world, in terms of the anxieties that they're suffering. Their life experience is worlds apart from mine. And I think there are people of my age and upwards are more likely to be the power holders in church. So we've got to do a lot of getting off our comfy pews and listening to the people who aren't there and find out how do they want to worship God. Because you could tell, couldn't you? There was a vibrant spirituality going on.
They wanted it to be embedded in their lives.
Yeah.
And how come you've got comfy pews anyway?
Yeah, when I said that, I could hear it coming out all wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was struck about the reflection of we need to do this together. We need you to help us. We need you to help us work out what we think and what we want to say, and give us ways that we can do it, not just speaker-led, if you like, be interactive ways. I thought that was quite striking. We want to be part of this, and we want it to be a conversation, but there's a kind of, how do you facilitate and enable that to happen for all of us?
That's right. And it's so easy, especially with younger children, perhaps, to manipulate them into saying what you as an adult want them to say. And I think that's my only uneasiness about that lovely video that you showed at the start, because it's an adult who's scripted that video and is putting words in the mouth.
Yeah.
It's a really valuable message, don't get me wrong. I totally love it, and the presentation is obviously a script. So there's no hiding and pretending there. But going into anyone who works with children in whatever context, in a school, in church, we all know that sometimes children will say things because they want to please you. So really listening and really getting proper participation and dialogue with young people is one of our challenges. We've not cracked it yet, but Toby's making a great start.
Maybe just to say at this point, we had a previous webinar, and Michelle, who's here with us from Portobello Joppa, shared her story, which was very much about how they brought about this culture change in the church to really engage and listen to children and young people. So people might like to go back and listen to that. And it was a very powerful journey of culture change and of bringing children, young people, bringing their voices in, bringing them to participate fully in the life of the church in very considerable ways.
Wow. We'll have to go and listen to that, Michelle.
That was very kind. I was going to say, I liked how when she interviewed them, every answer was valued. Everything was encouraged. There was nothing that was, no, that's the wrong answer. Everything was encouraged and valued. I think that's so important that they authentically felt that they were heard in that setting as well, which is lovely. And I liked a bit about interactive as well, because that's the learning style in school. That's the way, and they're at Sunday school and they're at youth group, things like that, it's always interactive. So to all of a sudden be in a church service and then have it be one directional doesn't match up with their world experience. And so I think it's a really lovely insight that they've brought out, saying actually, if it was interactive, that would help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Right. One of the all Church of England schools, I don't know if it's the same in Scotland, but all of the Church of England schools to have a distinctively Christian vision And quite a lot of the ones who don't really, they're not really sure what that means. They've grabbed this verse from John, these words of Jesus, because it's this kind of really good, and it's nice and wholesome. So you will see this as the vision statement of an awful lot of Church of England schools, and that doesn't mean that it's not worth saying. Obviously, it's one of my verses in the Bible. I've come, says Jesus, so that they can have life in all its fullness. And it's this this generosity of Jesus's whole way of being with children, of ways of being with everybody, that he wants every single person to be the person that they are when they're their best self, in the best way, so they can do the things that God has in store for them, and have the best life. And that doesn't mean obviously champagne and caviar, nice than that would be, but about being their true self, their authentic self, being the reality of who they are, made to be in Christ. And I was thinking about this around this picture. I genuinely can't see you. I've got a picture of cake on my laptop, so all I can see is cake instead of all of you. I don't know how to find you again. So please, would you unmute and call things out? But here's an interesting picture on the screen. Could you just call out things that you see in it?
I thought it said Eric, but then now I read it says E equals MC squared.
Yep. Yeah, on the blackboard there. Yep. E equals MC squared. Yep.
A church.
Yep, some sort of church thing. Yeah.
Beam of light.
Are we down the middle?
Book.
A book.
People
A
coming in.
wastepaper basket.
Yeah, wastepaper basket. Yeah.
Crossed arms.
Oh yeah, crossed arms. Yeah, very grumpy. Well, possibly grumpy, but definitely crossed arms. Yeah.
Who's an old man with a beard, whereas a young man has his hands wide open and raised.
Yep, absolutely.
People
The
coming
young
in.
man has a halo.
Oh yeah, it does look like a halo, doesn't it? Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, other bits on the blackboard: religion is a religion. Truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Yep. Has anybody got any idea which story in the Bible this is portraying?
Jesus in the temple when he was lost.
That's right. Yes, our favorite safeguarding story. You'll remember it. You'll know very, very well. They've gone up to the Passover when Jesus was about 12, so on the cusp of being a grown up in that culture. The whole village goes up to the Passover festival in Jerusalem. And they do all the thing, all the celebration, wonderful time all together. And then Mary and Joseph set off home. And after a day, they realise Jesus isn't there, and isn't with the aunties, and isn't with the uncles, isn't anywhere. And so they leg it back to Jerusalem and look for him for 3 days and 3 nights. 3 days and 3 nights. Yeah. And eventually they find him, and he's there in the temple. And he's sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And he has the little interchange with his parents, which all parents are just going, and goes back to Nazareth with them. And Luke finishes with this lovely line: and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favour with God and people. And it's that verse at the end of this little very telling story that I was thinking about when I was thinking about the spiritual nurture of children and young people in our culture. Because there's something about Jesus was able to become the person that he was meant to be. He was able to do the amazing mission that he was called to. He was everything. His life was life in all its fullness. He was able to become that person. And as we look at this little story, I think it's not too imaginative to think that actually perhaps there are some clues as to some of the things that were in place in Jesus's childhood and upbringing, which helped him to become the person that he was meant to be. So can you think of anything in that story or around that story? And you might need to be a little bit imaginative, but not too imaginative. What sort of things do you see which surrounded Jesus and gave him a community that really supported him in his spiritual growth?
Adults listening to him.
Adults listening to him, absolutely. Yeah. Even if they ended up grumpy like the guy with the beard. Is he grumpy or is he just thinking very deeply? I'm not sure. But adults listening, yes, definitely.
I think there's a sense in which Jesus grew up in a household. Joseph was making things with wood, building constructions round about him, and changing the way the world was by making something.
That's really interesting. Yes, this creative household, this useful household, this hard-working household, absolutely. Yeah, changing the world by what they were doing, by their work. Really interesting.
Jesus had. Go ahead.
Sorry, Isabel. No, you should go first. You started.
Well, I was just thinking Jesus had a good understanding and knowledge of the scriptures. He'd been taught the scriptures.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when, people were surprised when he stood up to read that he knew them so well at that age, but he did.
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody taught him those scriptures. Somebody put
it's an earlier passage in Luke, though, that Mary goes to visit Elizabeth, and Elizabeth's husband was a priest and took his turn in the temple, and although we don't get too much sense of how much Jesus and John the Baptist knew each other. They were only 6 months apart, and I just wonder how much that connection with the other family of John the Baptist family connects into how Jesus grew up. We don't know. The scriptures are silent on it.
Oh, how interesting! How interesting! I'd never even thought that actually. Maybe was it Zechariah?
Yeah.
Could he have still been a priest at that stage? In this story, he'd be very old, wouldn't he? Oh,
probably.
Interesting.
But then maybe even if he wasn't an active priest, he would have known all that stuff and maybe been more available if he wasn't. The priests took turns, so they weren't always on duty.
Wow. Lots of stuff. All brilliant ideas and taken me off in whole new threads of thought. Here are a few that I jotted down when I was cogitating on it. I thought it's a safe community and it's an intergenerational one. Lots of different ages coming together. Family is key. We see that in the story that Mary and Joseph were on this journey, this pilgrimage with Jesus. They went as a family, and they went and looked for him afterwards. It was family mattered. It was a community with rhythms and seasons, as we see in the festivals that they had. So it had a stability there, surrounded the children and the adults with a rhythm, a season. Isabel mentioned this one. Space for listening, questioning, answering, we see in this story. Different interlinking structures working together. So you've got, in this story, we see all this faith nurture going on. In the picture, you've got the temple, the kind of, the big picture stuff, the teachers of the day who were like the top of their class. But you've also got, as somebody mentioned, Jesus had the scriptures. He was taught back in Nazareth as well. There was some religious community there, whether it was a synagogue or not, I don't know. But there was a village structure of faith there as well, and presumably the family, presumably the family unit as well, or he would have been in a very unusual Jewish family from that period. So all these different interlinking structures helping him to thrive. I think it's worth saying Jesus's spirituality was already there. it was already happening, and a community where he could flourish physically, cognitively, relationally to become the adult capable of fulfilling his calling. Just like Luke points out in that beautiful last verse, Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in knowledge of other people and of God, in favor with other people and with God. So he was relationally connected as well. So yeah, lots of things that help Jesus become the person that he was meant to be, a community where adults learn from and with a child as well. And it just feels, in our broken and fragmented and weird and wonderful society, can we as a church pick up something of that vision, something of that way of insisting that we are going to give our children and young people the best possible chance of having life in all its fullness, becoming the people that they are meant to be? Could we do our bits to change the culture in all sorts of ways so that some of these things might be visible in our world for the children and the young people that we care for? So growing faith, growing faith is the movement, as you can see, that exists to change the culture of the Church of England, which is a phrase that still makes my team fall about laughing every time we say it, because it's just such a bonkers thing. It's just such a huge, huge thing to say. But to change the culture of the Church of England so that we all instinctively put children and young people at the centre. So what Michelle has done in her church, that's what we're trying to do across the Church of England. And at the moment, we are so far off that in so many places. We are, even with the vision and strategy about growing younger and more diverse, we are still a million miles from people really understanding and instinctively getting the fact that we are a church that is a church for young people. It is their church as much as it's our church. In fact, it's God's church. Frankly, it's not our church at all, but it's a place where everybody should belong, where children and young people have the same rights as adults, and maybe some more of the responsibilities as well. But certainly where children are prioritised, where young people are prioritised and put right at the heart of things, not to the exclusion of other age groups at all, but where are they now? And they're not in many of our churches, and they don't have a voice in many of our churches. So this is about restorative justice, really, giving people who don't belong the ability to belong. And the way that we've been set up to go about this is with the working together of churches, schools, and households. And this comes, there's my little diagram, look. This is our logo at the moment. We're hanging on to it desperately, but we've been rebranded and we've got a really strange logo coming up, which is nothing like our hoops. So we're hanging on to our hoops. It's the interplay of households or homes and families and churches explores with the child really at the front and foremost of our minds and hearts. And when all those work together, research says that's when the child's spirituality has the best chance of flourishing. So that's why they come together. The research came from the National Institute for Christian Education Research, NICER, which is based down at Canterbury University. And they've done this wonderful set of resources, which you probably know, and they have these wonderful animations to express their research, which are freely available. And just Google Faith in the Nexus and you'll find it. But they have all sorts of insights into the ways that churches, homes, and schools can work together. And when the Church of England was playing around with this idea of growing faith, they came across the research which amplified and backed up what the group at the time were sort of feeling their way towards, and feeling this is obvious. We've got these wonderful Church of England schools, and where does faith come into that? Where does faith development come in? How does spiritual development come in appropriately in our school system? And Faith in the Nexus put words and research and articulated what the group had been feeling. So I've just pulled out a tiny fragment of their findings, but Bible encounters help children flourish spiritually, space for reflection, faith talk, opportunities to lead, interestingly, a sense of belonging, which perhaps isn't so tangible, but you know when it's there and when it's not there. And the sacraments, they found, helped children's spirituality to flourish. So yeah, that's where the Growing Faith Foundation sprang up from. Growing Faith, we've got a website. It's quite easy to find if you Google it. It's dreadful to find if you try and work your way through the Church of England website, or you could just take a photo of that QR code, or just hold your camera up to the QR code, and you'll get to our web page where everything is available that we've got. And I can share that later if you'd like to. But this is what we're doing. We've got work streams to try and effect this culture change. So we've got our little team there. Justin Welby, alas, is not in our team, apart from in a cheering on and supportive, and I'm sure praying way. But there's most of our team there. And our work streams are the ways that we're trying to get this culture change going. So we started with prayer, because it is such a ridiculous thing to try and change the culture of the Church of England, that we knew it had got to be God's work, not ours. So we've got a prayer support team which is growing all the time. We send out a weekly prayer letter on a Monday morning, just to invite people to pray for the different things that the team's doing that week, or that we've heard of around the networks and hubs and so on. And I think it's up to 271 people now. So yeah, that's a lovely way of feeling connected. The networks are run by Hannah, who's standing to Justin Welby's left. No, his right, just behind me in the photo. Hannah runs the networks. She's the networks lead. And this is trying to get people connected who work with children and young people. And there are a lot of people in the C of E who are children's and youth ministers of one who don't feel listened to and don't feel seen, don't feel that they feel very isolated. So whether that's chaplains in schools, or toddler group leaders, or clergy who just want to help out in their local school and don't know how to do it and want to serve their school. all sorts of different types of people. Hannah brings them together and networks them so that they can support each other and inform each other. One of the most popular networks is an ongoing one, which is trauma-informed and mental health good practice. And that's, that meets regularly and just meets online. And they have a bit of input and a lot of chat to support each other in a very focused way. So the networks are about relationship, trying to build up the relationships of people around the country so that we create this groundswell of energy and mutual encouragement and support. The Strategic Leaders Programme that Stephen runs is about focusing on getting our leaders to be the best leaders they can be. And it's mostly lay people who are on it. And we've got a few archdeacons and vicars, but by and large, it's about helping leaders in all sorts of walks of the church and church ministry and school ministry to become more strategic in their approach. And it's all done through a growing faith lens and is proving very effective for turning people who think that, who feel that they've got some sort of responsibility or gift for leadership, but don't fit into any of the training programs that the church offers. It gives them an opportunity to say, oh, I see how I'm a leader. I can have confidence in being the leader in my sphere of influence. I can help lead culture change where I am. So that's proving very effective in the lives of individuals. The Youth Advisory Group is something that Toby's setting up because we want a relationship with some young people. And so that we're not sort of diving in and asking them questions out of the blue and then diving out again. But we want an ongoing relationship so that we can really ask the hard questions and get some deep listening going on, as well as the sort of, occasional interview type things. Hubs are related to the research projects, and those are both ways of trying to keep on understanding new ways of being a growing faith community, of doing growing faith, of ways for the church and the school and households to all join together with children at the centre. So we've got those numbers of hubs that you can see up there on the go at the moment. And Cheryl's just opened up the applications for new hubs for next year. And we've got 12 research projects which are just being written up at the moment into a digest, which will be published on our website as a PDF and available for free. It should be this month. It should be by the end of the month. Oh, very soon, very exciting. And we've just got a new batch of research projects to look at next year. Interestingly, 4 of them that people have offered are around music and young people. Don't you think that's interesting? There's a real kind of energy at the moment behind how can church music of all sorts help the discipleship of young people to flourish, help the spirituality of young people to flourish. And there's a real energy behind it, so much so that Hannah's had to start a network about music and discipleship with young people. So yeah, that's exciting. Choir music and the sort of other sorts, less traditional sorts. Very interesting move of God. And another movement which is related to the Growing Faith Foundation is Flourish, which is new worshipping communities in schools. It basically churches in schools, and this is all very, very happening. Just starting now. It's a pilot. We've got about 12, 13 dioceses lined up to be part of this pilot, and they're going to try to bring to start a church community in the school that's shaped around young people, young people's leadership, that that has the values you can see on the screen, that's in close relationship with the local church, and that is created around the rhythms and the seasons and the needs of the school itself, so that it's actually a church community in the school. And this is huge. It could be really exciting. It could all fall flat on its face, but it's an exciting development, and it's just kicking off at the moment. So if you hear people talking about flourish in the C of E, that's what they're talking about, these new churches in schools. We'll see where it goes.
Lucy, can I ask a quick question there?
You certainly can. Let me try
Which is-
to from this.
Okay, are the schools that are considering forming a church within them, are these C of E schools or are they other schools?
The way that the pilots have been set up is that all the dioceses were invited to submit their plan for what they would do, so that each diocese has chosen or has gone to schools and said, would you like to do this? And a lot of schools obviously said no, and a lot have said yes. Looking at the list, the vast majority are church schools. There are some which are community.
We don't really have any church schools in the way that they exist in England. But I think what we do have is a lot of schools that have SU groups within them.
Okay.
And so that might be a kernel of something that would do something. And anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to
No.
bit more of that.
It's a really good question, Stuart. And there are several FE colleges who are involved, and the Church of England has, as far as I'm aware, has no C of E FE colleges at all. So they're definitely community colleges. So it's not
different when the young people are teenagers, so 18s and overs, and you can do things with them in a way that in an educational setting that gives them the choice to be involved, which is much more different in a school setting.
Oh yeah, completely. And there are lots of questions being raised about how we do flourish really well, and how we do it invitationally, and so that it's a joy and a life-bringing thing for the school, rather than proselytizing or Bible bashing or forcing kids into worship when they don't want to. This isn't about that. It's very invitational, very the control is held by the church and the school, and the young people are very much there at the design phase of it all. So but it could go wrong, could go horribly wrong. We shall see. So I'm just aware of the time. Look, I've whittled on. I'm so sorry. Do you need a screen break? Are you all happy? Gosh, you're tough in Scotland. You're tough. Thought it'd be good to just chat at this point anyway, and just share examples of what you've seen already. How do you see churches and schools working well together? What sort of things are the sort of intersection of churches and schools, the two circles there?
I have quite an opportunity in my parish. I'm a parish minister in northwest Lochaber, centred on Mallaig, at the end of the Harry Potter Railway. And my parish has 4 inhabited islands offshore, and also the community of Knoydart, which is effectively an island because you can only get to it by ferry. There's no connection to the UK road network. So those small schools are almost always pleased to see me in one way or another. And at least 3 of the 4 schools I go to, give me quite a lot of latitude within the school, within the school setting. It's the whole primary in one class, so there would be maybe my biggest one has 7 children in it. Smaller ones are less than that, maybe only 2 or 3 children. So they'll let me talk about whatever the children want to talk about. And I think that's an important facility to be able to do when we go into school is yes, to introduce a topic, but then to let the children direct where it goes after that, and to ask their questions, what they want to go to. Well, the head teachers have been very welcoming. I think mostly because they don't get very many adults into the school that are allowed to come in and talk to the children and are safe to talk to the children. And I guess I have to earn that in my early visits. But yeah, I just wanted to share that example of how that works. In the bigger schools where there's more resources and more people, it's harder to get in. Yeah. And we're dependent on the head teachers letting us in.
Absolutely. And interestingly, that's what Toby's finding. She's come straight out of school, and she was teaching RE in a school in London, and she started this work for us with great confidence. Oh yeah, I can get into schools. And she's suddenly found that when you're on the other side of the school gate, it's really hard to get in. Even her, with her sort of national church position, and she's an ex-teacher and all the rest of it, she still can't get into schools. They can be very impenetrable. Michelle, do you have a good relationship with your school?
Well, it's a bit of a mixture. So I think one of the things that our church is able to provide is a space for assemblies, because the whole school, the local primary school, can't meet in their building. That they can come to our church and have the whole space, and everyone can gather for the big assemblies each year. So supporting that way has been one big thing, but it is so dependent upon the head teachers. And so we used to have a lot more access in that school with SU groups or things like that, and now we don't, because it's a different head teacher. But then the minister is the chaplain of sorts for the high school, so he's up at the secondary school quite a bit, and he does lots of assemblies there. So the school access is it just varies depending upon which school we're at. But for me, the school's work I do is actually as a parent. So my way into the school was because I was already a parent at my kid's school, and so I do godly play for RME for P1 to P4 up here. But I only have that access because I'm a parent, so I was invited him to come and do the RME. That was it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
I was sharing with Lucy before we started that yes, the school system is very different and the curriculum's different up here. We don't have faith schools other than a few Catholic ones. However, I think across the country, significant numbers of churches are engaged in schools in a whole variety of different ways. And I think that's increasingly being recognized both by the church, but also by the schools and local communities as very significant. So I think even if we don't have the faith-based schools and an easy entry, I think through those relationships that Stuart and Michelle have shared about, I think a lot of parish ministers have and see as part of their role to build connections and to relate to the local school as best they can. I mean, some places it isn't easy and things change, but on the whole, I think it's very positive what we're seeing.
Most schools have a parent council. Which has some staff on it, also some parents on it as well, and they're allowed to co-opt a few people from outside the school community onto the parent council. And I was on the parent council in my previous parish at the high school there, but I don't even know what the arrangements are for parent councils in my present parish. But many parents might well be on the parent, with a church connection, might be on the parent council. That might help us to make a connection. I've never even thought about exploring that possibility.
Yeah. That's a good one. Our governors would be the equivalent, I suspect. Yeah. I think there was a story that I heard in the very early days of growing faith, which felt really significant. And it kind of epitomised what growing faith, what this relationship between church and schools was like. And it was a vicar who'd come to a new parish and found that she wasn't allowed in the school. There was the church and the school had fallen out. They big time in the past. I don't think anyone remembered why, but just they'd had a bad thing in the past, and they had nothing to do with each other in the present. And the vicar thought, oh, this is no good. We can't do this. So she went to the school, and instead of saying, and it was a Church of England school, instead of saying, kind of, I want to come in and do collective worship, do assemblies. I want to, come and run things for you and so on. Instead of that, she just said, what can the church do for you? And because of the hurt from the past, the head kind of sneered and said, well, if you want to help, the best thing you can do is give us donuts. Give the staff donuts. That's what we'd really like. And kind of sent her on her way. And every Friday after that, for 6 weeks, the vicar sent in a tray of donuts into the staff room and left them there. And it took 6 weeks, but after 6 weeks, there were in the school newsletter, it was, oh, what a wonderful relationship we have with our local church. How great it is that we're going to do so much together. We're so much enjoying it. And it had been transformed. And it was a tiny thing. It was just donuts. But it was, for me, it was something about the church asking the school what they needed, rather than the church, as we sadly often do, storming in and saying, we know what you need and it's this, and this is what we're going to give you. And I think growing faith, if nothing else, it's an excuse to sort of stop and say, oh, could we do things differently? Are we serving the school in the way the school wants it? It may well be, but are there other ways that we could help out, that we could work with them for the good of the children and the staff in the school? And some really creative, amazing things have come up. There was one school that was having a Shakespeare company in to do some work on Romeo and Juliet. And and the vicar said, oh, that's really interesting. There's some really good theological themes in Romeo and Juliet. Can we work with you and do things related to Romeo and Juliet in the church as well as in the school? And they started this big Shakespeare project, working across the church and the school, exploring faith through Shakespeare, which is totally weird, but responding to something that was going on in the school. Really excitingly. And one of the videos, which I could play, but we probably don't have time, but you can pick up on the website if you're interested, is a lovely one, which is one of our hubs, one of the hubs that we're walking with for a couple of years. And the hubs are just communities of different sorts. It might be a church, it might be a school, it might be a whole diocese, it might be a theological college, it could be any sort of grouping of people. And they just a group of people who really want to go forward with growing faith where they are. And this particular hub is in the dioceses of Winchester and Portsmouth, because they share an education team across the two dioceses. And they said, we want churches and schools to work together with parents for the good of the children. And that's the third circle, of course, in growing faith, the parents and carers, the home aspect. And they said, we want to provide books. And they've ended up with this thing they've called Chatting Faith. And they give, they advertise it in a school assembly or collective worship. The head teacher shares the idea with the children, and the children go home and ask their parents if they're allowed to do it, if they're interested. And there's a small group of families who are each given a bag, a nicely presented bag of about 6 children's books. And they're not faith-based books. They're just lovely picture books that you would read as in school or as a child. And a little bit of sort of tat, you know, sort of drinking water bottles and notebooks and things just for fun. But the idea is that they come together around one of these books, and the parent reads the book with the child reads the book to the parent, and then they're given a set of cards, which are just basic, really simple questions to talk about what they've read about. And the books are carefully chosen to have interesting values, or, thoughtful things that you can bring out of them. Like I Am Nefertiti is all about, using someone's full name and their identity, really. And these question cards just are a really simple framework to talk together as a parent and child. And they have one question, which is something like, a bit like The Godly Place, or, where do you see God in this story? It's not as blunt as that. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's something faith-based. And it's just lovely hearing what's coming out of that, the way that the parents are valuing the time with the children, the structure, the way of reading the book, that the head teacher's loving it because he's got some really close time with the children and their parents, and he can really see the relationships growing between them. The church is backing it and are doing services in the local church that relate to it and invite, and are especially designed for families. And so it's really lovely, kind of quite big scale thing that they've created. And I hope that it's going to be available as a resource, possibly in the summer, that they can share out. It'll be called Chatting Faith, it is. But yeah, just the director of education just had this really creative idea. How can we bring together church, home and school around literature, around books? Let's do this. Schools love books. Parents often need to or want to read with their children. Let's do it that way. I think it's really impactful. Which kind of, how are we doing? Gosh, quarter of an hour. We still all right, Isabel?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I will just whiz back to screen sharing for this final little bit, just as a, I say I will. Where's the screen? Oh, there it is. The big green one in the middle. Here we go. Share. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's the third sphere, and we've got churches working with schools and all the beautiful creative things that can happen across that partnership. But the third sphere is the households, the families, the parents, the carers. And it's this research that you can see on the screen came out just after the pandemic, and was looking at how parents want churches to help them in their faith nurture of their children. And so there's a strong element of understanding that Christian parents, or the parents, are the primary movers and shakers in the faith life of their own children. Will this move on now? Hang on. Let's see, here we go. This Gen Z report came out, Gen Z report came out a while back, and the figures totally add up. but you can see the gist of when young people were asked who or what influences the way you think about faith or religion, the big winner is family. Family, then friends and teachers, similar amount. But that family is so significant in the faith nurture or otherwise of children. It's an obvious one. But we still don't quite know what to do with that as a church. More and more resources, Parenting for Faith do brilliant resources for this, and Care for the Family are the other big providers of really good resources. But in what we see in Growing Faith, and in the projects that people come to us and want us to support them in, every time it's this area of the home, the household, which is most difficult to crack. It's the hardest to resource. It's the hardest to get in contact with the people that you're trying to reach, because you can talk to a vicar or a minister for a church, and you can talk to a head teacher or a governor for a school, but who do you talk to talk to the parents? You could talk to the Parent Teacher Association, but it's not easy, is it? And every single family or household is different. The diversity of families just in your neighborhood is massive. So one size doesn't fit all. And what's, one family reading beautiful books on the Chatting Faith project together would love it, another would hate it. And so it's the slipperiest bit of the whole of the Growing Faith kind of three loops working together. And what might a church do to support, equip, and empower parents in their partnership role of children's faith nurture? I guess I'm quite sure that all of you on the screen have ideas about this. I think one thing I would love to encourage our churches is acknowledge that it's the parents who are the main movers and shakers in children's faith nurture, not the church. So what can the church do to help parents, and to think about that for their context? Because every church is going to be different. Every set of parents in the church is going to be different. So it's really hard to do a one size fits all there. But what might a church do to support, equip, and empower parents in their partnership role in children's faith nurture? What could a church do that even acknowledges that this is the case? I don't know if anyone has any ideas. Hang on, let me stop sharing here. There we go.
I guess one of the things you can do is to have parent and children evenings where, if you like, the church, or it could be on a Saturday, for example, or Sunday even, where the church looks after the children and gives them some activities to do, and then the parents have an opportunity to talk to each other. And I guess that's a little bit the way, like, our messy breakfast works, where the children get active at the tables, and some of the parents join in around the activity tables, and others of the parents talk to each other and have this opportunity to talk either about the theme or about other issues that are going on. Our messy breakfast is a very minimal thing, but I think that kind of event where you gather the church parents together so that they can talk about the issues that they have with their children, and helping them to understand the gospel, would also help the other folks in the church are not parents at the time to understand how we could help them.
That's a really good point, Stuart. And I remember when my kids were little, as a couple, we could easily teach them to brush their teeth. It was a given. You know, you brush your teeth morning and evening because my parents had done that with me. So they'd modeled that to me, really easy. But when it came to how do we bring them up in the Christian faith, I didn't have a clue. And we didn't know what to do. We made it up as we went along. You know, we didn't know what we were doing. And probably partly because my husband was a minister, we didn't do what seems like a really obvious thing now. We didn't do we don't know how to do this. Who can help us in this church? What do the rest of you do? How do you do it with your children? Now I would be going, help me, I don't know what to do. What do I do? But then for some reason, we just assumed that everybody else was doing it. And we were the only ones who didn't know how. And it was Emperor's New Clothes. We couldn't admit how ignorant we were. Michelle, do you do stuff in your church with your parents and carers?
I do a coffee morning, but that's open to the wider community, not necessarily just the church itself, and that's for parents and carers of babies under 18 months. So it's not a play group; it's more of a coffee space where parents and carers can chat with each other and all that. So that's sort of my main contact that way. But again, there's only maybe 1 or 2 church families that take part, and that it's mainly community based, as it were. But I would agree that like anytime we're at Messy Church, you've got so many fantastic conversations around the tables and around the meals and things like that. That's where we get a good connection too. But we did a lot of we did the Messy Church bags throughout lockdown, and then that carried on. So every year at Advent, we send home a bag to all the children, whether Messy Church, a youth group, or Sunday Stars, or even the coffee morning parents, to say, here's some things you could be doing in the month of December with your children at home. And certainly whenever there's a good blog or something for Parenting for Faith, I'll try to make sure I'm sharing that with families too, or resources like that. But it's always that delicate balance of not overloading families with more things to read and more things to do, yeah. So yeah, still trying to figure that one out.
Yeah, I think we all are. And does your church do anything in that sphere?
I would say the only thing they really do on a regular basis is the toddlers group, which most of the people who come along to that actually don't have any other connection with the church other than bring the children along on a Friday morning. And it's a safe space for the mums to have a cup of coffee while some of our older ladies play with the children, who have a great time because maybe their grandchildren are far away and it's almost like surrogate grandchildren for them. So they're getting something out of it. That would be the main thing that I think we do at that age. We haven't done Messy Church since before lockdown. We talk about it, but we've not actually got around to doing it again or anything like that. And I think so much has changed, and so many people have changed that it's difficult to know where to start sometimes.
It is. We had a lovely thing in our Messy Church here in the village, which we started a couple of years ago. We'd done what was the theme? I can't remember the theme, but we ended up in the celebration playing a much quieter song than usual. It was that wonderful Lord, wonderful God, you are my shield, my protector. I will lie down, go off to sleep, knowing you're watching over me. I think it's a Dougie Doug Doug song. I could be wrong. A very quiet, peaceful, almost lullaby one. And the next time we saw one of the families, the mum said, my son, who's 3 or 4, he wasn't sleeping. He wouldn't go to sleep on his own. He was too scared. And we came home from Messy Church, and he said, "It's all right, Mummy. I've got my cross." He'd made a whole cross. "I've got my cross, and I know that Jesus is watching over me," because we sang it in that song. And slept on his own for the first time for yonks. And it was just that. I mean, obviously wonderful for that family, but something about church providing something that went into the home in a very, very real way was very special. Yeah.
Lynn, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm in a position where our country churches are being sold. So no longer are the local children able to go to their local church to do their end of term things, and I'm going to say we joined with a church in a town. It's only 10 minutes away, but the gulf, I coming from a city, the gulf of 10 minutes from the country to the town is ridiculous to me that they can't meet in either space. But yeah, we're trying things. We have the mums and tots, and we've just started Messy Church. But I was thinking all through this, what we've been describing is what I would really like to encourage in the church I'm in now. Not really happening yet, but I'll keep plugging away at it till they get rid of me. In my previous church, I used to be called that English one with all those funny ideas to see what this new. But our last church was in Somerset in Weston-super-Mare, and it was a relatively new build. It wasn't a traditional church. We had to put the chairs out for service and put them away and all this sort of thing. But it just seemed to live the community of Christ. And the more I think about it, it was probably more like the early church. It really was one big happy family. And the vicar, he was young, he was brilliant. Communion was for all, so the children could go up, and he'd bend down and speak to them, and he'd say, what's been going on in your life this week? What would you like to say to God? You know, have things been rough or have they been good? And he'd spend a wee few moments, and I thought, this is so different to other churches I've been, where they just go and pass by the children, which really gets me, because I used to be an infant teacher, so I'm all for promoting children's growth in every way. Not only that, my husband, who you might know, I believe you might know his father for you through Barnabas. So I've got a message here saying, my father-in-law supported you when you were in Barnabas. Is that right?
Oh, what's his name?
Oh, Christopher Podger.
Christopher Podger. Yes, he did. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, small world. Small.
It is. It's even smaller because I think he would have preferred his son to marry a southerner, not a northerner, but we'll not go there. It was a brilliant church because my husband at that time was away quite a lot, weeks, months, whatever. And there was enough children in the church at the time that we had 3 separate Sunday schools running from 0 through to about probably 12, and a fair number. And when the church were being put away, mostly the men, I have to admit, would play what I call rough games with the children, which was wonderful for me because I had 2 boys, and at that time they were past me being able to go way up in the air and chase them and do all sorts of daft things. And for the boys, it was a second home. We had meals there. We went on holidays together. We went away and just occupied. Well, I don't know if Hill House is still running. I can't even remember where it was, but we all went off to Hill House for the weekend. And it was an opportunity either to be immersed in scripture, or if you just wanted to run out and enjoy the countryside surrounding Hillside, you could do that. Well, guess what? I got the short straw out with the boys. When I was ill, I didn't go to church one Sunday. Vicar was on my door. Matthew was there saying, we're just worried because you're usually there every week. And I said, oh, God, you know. Next thing I know, someone had come down with a meal because they kept a freezer full of meals. At the weekend, they took the boys off me, so I wouldn't have to worry about them.
Wonderful.
It was just so
real
nice.
community.
Yeah, it really was. And okay, Matthew's moved on now. We went back for a funeral of a friend and thought, wow, this is different. But for that short space, it was wonderful. And I'm not getting at the Church of Scotland. I really do like the Church of Scotland. And I like its structure far more than the Church of England. Sorry. But when my boys came here, we went to a wee church called Morrow's. And it's traditional T-shape, hard seats. I spent the first few months there putting my hand out because they just somehow the pews are arranged that boys manage to slip off them, and then they come up and crack their heads underneath the pew. So it sort of detracts from the whole point of going to church when you're constantly safeguarding your children. But
Sorry, carry on, Lynn.
Just like to get that sort of, this is what church really is.
It is this joined up thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just
and those relationships and belonging.
Yeah, it's just coming to church on Sunday. I've ticked the box, I've done it, see you next week.
I wonder whether I could just share one very brief example, and then Lucy, if you could just draw it together and close us with the prayer, that would be lovely. I think there is a real challenge about how do we connect into the home and into parents and caregivers from our toddler groups, from our churches, from our messy churches. What are the ways, what are the tools that we can encourage and parents to use, like that song, like something, a cross or the words of a prayer that parents can gradually start to use in their homes and in their families and develop some of those family kind of traditions. There's a lovely thing that the Scottish Bible Society up here are doing called Bibles for Bairns, where people register a baby in each year. So you register your baby and the baby gets sent on their first birthday a toddler Bible. And then on their second birthday, they get sent something else. Third birthday, fourth birthday, fifth birthday, they get sent a children's Bible. And so it's really encouraging giving a gift of a Bible to encourage parents to read that Bible, use that Bible with their children in the home. And it's a really lovely way of beginning to encourage. So that's a gift in a sense from the church to the family to encourage spiritual life within and faith development within the home. It's a really nice little example that we're hoping that people will really catch on here. But there's lots of other things and some tools and resources that you've suggested there that we maybe need to be sort of intentional about passing those on to parents to use in the home and with their children. Michelle?
I was just going to add that we've been doing intergenerational worship now in our church congregation since we joined church in 2001, I think it was, and that's actually made a big difference as well with parenting faith at home, and that because we're all hearing the sermons together and taking part in the same worship service together, some of the themes of that week then carry on, at least in my own home, in our conversations with our kids. So I've heard that from other parents as well. So even just that space to gather together as a family unit and then have that shared experience to continue on with has been a big impact.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, intergenerational, fabulous. Well, thank you so much. Really interesting, really challenging. And we've got a long way to go to change culture in any of our churches. But I think it is one of those kairos moments. It is one of those times where we can walk with God and run behind God and join in with his love and his care for every single child and young person in our communities. And just that verse from Luke to finish up with, what we long for every one of our children, Jesus. And we hope the children where we are grew in wisdom and stature and in favour with God and people. And let's pray. Loving God, we thank you for your heart for children and young people. Thank you for your love for families of all shapes and sizes. Thank you for the safety net that families provide and the way that when it's at its best, as Lynn was describing, the church is a family, for a place of belonging for everybody. And we long for our churches to be places of belonging. We long to be outward looking. We long to serve our communities and our families. And we pray that you will help us to know what we can do, to see the people that we can be, and to see the opportunities in each of the contexts you placed us in to serve you and to bring your word of life to those children, young people and their families. Thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, Lucy, thank you so much for coming all the way from England to come and share with us in Scotland. It's wonderful just to have you to hear about these three concentric circles, which I think we really need to start to think a little bit more about how we engage in each of those areas and how we build up those connections. And I think those examples that we've all shared have been really, really helpful, looking at both church, school, and households. So thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for joining us. It's been lovely to spend this time thinking about this together. And we'll hope that the recording gets out to many more people so that we can move become a little bit more strategic, more intentional at building and growing our church and growing and sharing faith.